live. I notice, Andrew, that you're online. Are you preparing to share your slides, or did you want me to share your slides?
I'm happy to run with whatever is easiest.
Well, it's usually easiest if you drive your slides, but if you wish me to do so, then I can.
Sure, we'll have a crack when we get to it of me launching it. If I have a technology issue, I might refer to you.
Okay, sounds good. All right, well, let's crack on then, and welcome to all those who've just joined us on Facebook, and to the 15 and steadily growing number of participants on the Zoom call, to the November meeting of the Gungahlin Community Council. I will give a few updates on what the Community Council has been doing. I normally have these in a PowerPoint slide, but for a variety of reasons, that's not happened this week. So it will just be a simple verbal summary, and then we'll get on to our two speakers tonight. Our major topic tonight is an update from the Suburban Land Agency on a wide range of issues, and Andrew Griffiths will lead that. And then Kevin Cox, a long time at the Gungahlin Community Council, wants to talk a little bit about community batteries. That's not necessarily something the Gungahlin Community Council is peddling, but it's something Kevin believes is of interest to the community, and it's certainly a very interesting topic and generates a conversation wherever I go. So they're the two items we have tonight, and of course we're always happy to take questions as they arise. As I promised, I'll just give you an update on some of the things that are going on. But from a process point of view, our next meeting on the 8th of December will be also our annual general meeting. So this is, I guess, a formal, informal declaration of the AGM. We'll get a post out in the next 2 or 3 days on our website to that effect. And as usual, all the office bearers of the Community Council will be spilled, and we'll effectively end our terms. And we have to, all those who are interested in participating in the Community Council need to reapply and be elected to those positions. But I think that's a process most of you are well familiar with. So that's the first thing, AGM. The second thing is today, the government has responded to the 2 motions regarding development in the Gungahlin Town Centre, one by Andrew Braddock in, I'm going to say, August or July, and the other proposed by Suzanne Orr in February. Look, and I'd love to give you a short summary of those, but I honestly haven't had the time today to process them. They only came out today. My initial response is that the detail in the responses to the motions is reasonably positive. I think the response in relation to our petition is a bit disappointing, and certainly some of the aspects we're looking for in terms of exploring alternative options to a large-scale office and looking at ways of encouraging development in the town centre has been a very weak response, essentially amounting to the government sending a letter to the Federal Minister for Finance saying it's a good idea to move a department to Gungahlin. That hasn't worked for 30 years, and it's unlikely to work this time. So I think that's a particularly weak area, but we'll try and get back a more detailed response when we've had a time to digest it. But if you read carefully, there's some acknowledgement in there of challenges, maybe not explicit, but it is there. And I think we'll see more fireworks, well, maybe not fireworks, when the government responds to the inquiry into draft variation 364, which was the document that sort of kicked a lot of this frustration off earlier this year. And that won't happen until January. So I think we're making progress, but the details are yet to be finalised. And I'm looking forward in particular to Andrew's talk from the SLA just now, because a lot of the government's response hinges on the engagement that the SLA are going to undertake with the community about the remaining parts of the town centre. So that's really kind of the big breaking news here in the GCC, but it's quite a lot of material, a copy of a speech given by the Minister and 3 other documents. It's quite a lot to digest. Just in terms of other things we've been active on, we have written to Minister Steele asking him to clarify whether it's true that 5 5 roads in Gungahlin are in the ACT top 10 for accidents, as reported by the insurer AAMI, and also seeking a regular catch-up with him and the team from the Transport Canberra and City Services to discuss all matters of traffic and so I guess city presentation that keep coming across our desk. We're waiting a response from that. I confirmed the Minister office is going to respond formally to that. So we're looking forward to that. We have heard that the work on the stage 4 of the marketplace is likely to proceed shortly. That's code for the new year. And we'll have the team from the owners of the town centre, who just this instant pop out of my head. They'll be speaking at our December meeting about where things are at. That's well, the Vinter Group who own that. So that's good news. Somewhat depressingly, on the flip side, we did get an update from the owner of the site that the cinema is located on about progress there, and he's had no indication from the developer and the operator that they are ready to move forward. Still waiting for things to get a bit more positive post-COVID. So some of you will have noticed that there is progress on the Yerraby Rotunda, a project initiated by the Rotary group of Gungahlin, who secured some federal funding and have some additional support from Rotary themselves and also from the Gungahlin Community Council to build the rotunda, and the concrete slabs being laid, and we're aiming for an early December opening of that, and so that's pretty exciting. And they're really the key issues that have consumed our time. Certainly the work around advocacy for the town centre has been all-encompassing. So I'll just look to see if anyone's fired a chat or raised a hand to indicate whether there are any questions relating to what I've just spoken about. And I see no chat messages and no hands. So look, I might hand straight over to Andrew to kick off the update from the Suburban Land Agency, and hopefully all the technology will come together for Andrew.
No problems. Thank you, Peter. Just give me a sec to share the screen.
Standing by. Oh, this is looking promising.
Excellent. Let's show from beginning.
Hey.
So that's up and visible?
It is.
Excellent.
Got a little incursion on the left, but we can live with that.
Sure. So do thank the Community Council for giving us the opportunity to speak tonight. I'd like to commence with acknowledging the Ngunnawal people, the traditional custodians of the land, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So as Peter alluded to, we're here to talk to a couple of topics tonight. Probably best to start off with what the agency is and what we do. So a good place to start is that our primary focus is creating great places where communities thrive. We are the delivery arm, so we do work to the indicative land release program in delivering government's intent for land outcomes in the greenfield space, the urban renewal space, but we also have very important focuses on playing our part towards affordable living, safe and healthy populations, promoting social inclusion on diversity, housing choices, and environmental sustainability. So they are all what you might call non-financial focuses that play a very key and important role in shaping our market approach and the way that we try to release land. In terms of, this is a good slide to show where we fit in the grand scheme of the land development and management pipeline. So you've got EPSDD that deal with a lot of the initial due diligence and adequacy review around shaping up land, statutory planning, identifying future greenfield or urban renewal sites, planning the indicative land release program, and then at the back end, EPSDD are also responsible for planning approvals on buildings and whatnot. You've also got TCCS that come into play as the long-term custodian to handle land management, maintenance of footpaths, lawn mowing, all the exciting bits and pieces like that. So then that leaves SLA to do detailed estate management and precinct placemaking, land release, and community engagement. So when we talk estate development plans, that's usually when a parcel of land starts to take shape on what it's going to look like in terms of the size of the land, the blocks, the zoning, some of the uses, and then that ties back into the overall planning. When we talk land release, that's often our ballots, our auctions, tenders are becoming quite relevant, and that's when we talk the Gungahlin Town Centre later on. Tenders are definitely the way forward that we'll be looking at there, and then moving into a very other important part of what we do, which is our community development, which is run through Mingle, that helps to spark building communities, shaping partnerships, working with schools as the new estates start to come out of the ground. So we'll be covering a couple of sections tonight. I was planning to run the whole way through the presentation before taking questions. Certainly happy if anything urgent jumps up that someone wants to interlude on, that we can take it, but it might be more efficient just to run the whole way through. So we've sort of got three sections we're planning to look at. That's the indicative land release program, which has recently been published, a quick update on the Moncrief and Taylor shops, and then some detailed discussion on our planned approach to the Gungahlin Town Centre. So jumping initially into the indicative land release program, government's recently published their 5-year indicative land release program. That's added an additional year on what we've seen in previous years, and the intent of that is to give a little bit more clarity to market, both your residential market and your development market for investment decisions and things like that. It's very important to stress the first word in the land release program, which is indicative. I'd be quite mindful that these first couple of lines that are applying to the Gungahlin Town Centre may not meet the expectations of some stakeholders with a lot of the activity and advocacy that's happened recently. We're very, very mindful that this may change subject to the outcomes of DV364 in particular for the town centre, and then Casey also has some further engagement that may push its release date potentially out of this financial year. But the indicative land release program is the primary document that guides SLA in terms of our land releases. So it is a really important one in terms of shaping where our activities and attentions are. Won't spend too long on this slide because we've got sub-slides on all of these individual elements. The second table on the right is also quite interesting in terms of the housing targets. That's a really important element of what we do in terms of supporting public housing, affordable and community housing, especially as the affordability market starts to become quite difficult, and there's a lot of strain in terms of those particular typologies and accessibility to the housing market. So jumping in again, I won't spend too long on this Gungahlin Town Centre slide because, as I noted, it is indicative at the moment. There are 2 blocks, or 3 lines, but 2 blocks in particular that have been identified for this financial year. Rough locality of where they are, which is one of 228 up the top here and one of 249. So top one is a commercial block, bottom one is a community facility block. They've both been identified for this financial year, but we will need to have a wait and see of what government's response to DV364 in particular, how these blocks might play into some of the precinct placemaking and some of the broader expectations for the town centre. You might find that they push in or out based on what the outcomes of those processes that are still underway are. So as we've noted, our approach to the town centre is discussed in a little bit more detail in section 3, that's talking about some of the bigger picture issues in terms of some a precinct level look at engagement and holistically planning in terms of land release. So I'll leave that till that slide there. Casey is on this financial year's land release. These 2 blocks, the history of those are they are handback sites in accordance with a estate development plan from a little while back. There is commitment to do further engagement on these blocks. That's been confirmed again at the estimates hearing, but our EPSDD colleagues also had indicated the intent to do further engagement. I can confirm we won't be looking at release activities ahead of that engagement. So definitely understand that these particular blocks are quite interesting. There's a lot of interested parties for these blocks, particularly with the community facility potential on those blocks. I'd recommend anyone, as those engagement processes come up, if you've got an interest in those sites, definitely look forward to participating in those processes and putting your views across. Taylor, which has been around for a few years now, we're heading into our final releases this year. Definitely a lot of interest in Taylor. That photo that we've got on the right there is our recently constructed nature play or pump track that integrates into the nature play playground. Interesting little element. These are certainly becoming more popular, but just one of the many excellent amenities within Taylor. Lots of footpaths, walking trails, playgrounds, so it's certainly a great place to live. We're currently running through the final ballot process, so we'll have 115 blocks coming out through that ballot, and the rankings and whatnot of that ballot process have been drawn and people will be picking blocks. We will have a couple of isolated releases after that just to tidy up the last couple of blocks through Taylor. The local centre is also halfway through a release, so we've had the initial component of the release of the local centre come out. We're planning to finalise the second stage of that release early 2022, but I'll talk more to that in the second section of this presentation. And also important to note that our Mingle team, or our community development team, which is Mingle, are active in Taylor. If you've recently bought in Taylor or live in or around Taylor, I'd recommend getting in touch. They do a lot of exciting programs in terms of springboarding community development, connecting you to your neighbours, starting to promote relationship building, so that as SLA starts to transition in 3 or 4 years, those relationships can continue to thrive. Jumping into Jacka 2, so we have recently, which is where we'll be heading after Taylor in terms of the next land releases, we've recently got planning approval for the first stage of Jacka 2, which covers around 500 dwellings approximately. The total estate is expected to deliver around 700 dwellings, and there's a mix of different housing choices within there: townhouses, multi-unit apartments, a lot of single detached dwellings. Jacka 2 will be an all-electric suburb supporting government's transition to net zero carbon by 2045. We've also got some opportunity for community scale batteries. Now, I understand that Matt from our sustainability team is on the call and is going to talk just a little bit towards our market sounding on this particular topic.
Yeah, sure am, Andrew. Thank you. Sorry in advance, my video seemed to not working, but hopefully you can hear me okay. Yeah, so thanks, Andrew, Peter, and nice to meet you all. I'm Matthew Keelan. I work in the Sustainability and Release Coordination team at Suburban Land, and we're currently investigating the feasibility for a community scale battery in the ACT in Jacka. So why Jacka, and what is a community scale battery? So just aligning, as Andrew mentioned, aligning with ACT government policy, the next stage of Jacka will be one of the few all-electric suburbs in the ACT, and we're also exploring ways to support more households have access to renewable energy, more efficient appliances, and future-proof homes for electric vehicle charging. We've also undertaken extensive work in close collaboration with the ANU and Evo Energy, which have found that a centralised energy storage system located within the suburb is feasible and can deliver a range of values to residents, the network, and the broader ACT community. So by community scale, we refer to their size and physical location in the electricity network, as they tend to be smaller than your average shipping container and more closely aligned with the green electrical box or pad mount substation that you might see in and around your suburb. But as they are a new technology, there are a host of options in the way they can be designed, who they're owned by, and what services they might provide. To help answer some of these questions, we've gone out to a market sounding process where we're seeking responses from industry on a range of areas, including who should own and operate the batteries, how to engage stakeholders, including those who might not have access to solar, for example, renters and those living in apartments, some technical questions such as perceived barriers to implementation and consideration for the right number and size of batteries, and ways that government can support the project, and defining some R&D objectives as well. So the market sounding process has been live for a month now, launching about this time last month, and will be open for a few more days until Tuesday, 16th of November, and it's accessible online on Tenders ACT. So this process is not part of a procurement process, and we'll decide if and how to proceed after consolidating in all the industry feedback from this market sounding process. We're really encouraged to hear that there is an active proposal presenting after our presentation tonight, but apologies, we're in a live process and we won't be able to tune in. But if there are any questions about the marketing process, they can be directed to Tenders ACT, which has an option to submit questions, or if there's any general questions, we can take them on notice and get back to you with a response at a later time. So thanks everyone. That's it from me. I'll hand it back to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Matt. Jumping into Kenny, which is the one of the last puzzle pieces in Gungahlin, as people will be actively awaiting that one. We've got construction of the new high school has commenced ahead of a scheduled opening year in the 2023 school year. DV 379, or draft variation to the Territory Plan 379, has formalised a pretty large chunk of Kenny into a nature reserve, supporting the offset outcomes of the Gungahlin Strategic Assessment. So that's supporting some ecologically endangered communities and special creatures. Our stakeholder engagement will will be a key component of shaping Kenny. So there'll be a lot more engagement as visioning, EDPs, stages start to take shape. So I'll be joined by Nicole from our capable engagement team to help talk through the next section, which is our update on the Moncrief Group Centre and the Taylor Local Centre, which has recently gone through an engagement process, and we're halfway through a release process. Might hand over to you, Nicole, to talk through this slide.
Thanks, Andrew. Hi, everyone. Firstly, I'd also like to acknowledge traditional owners of the land in which we're all meeting today, pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. So thank you to everyone who took part in this engagement. We had a really great response from the community, which is always great to see. So this engagement looked at the commercial sites the two commercial sites in Moncrief and the one in Taylor in the one engagement process. So we kicked off the engagement back towards the end of May, and it ran for a full 8 weeks. So we've just released the listening report this week. So we provided a range of different options for people to connect with us over this time. We spoke with you guys through the Community Council. We door knocked and spoke to local residents. We held a community pop-up event at the official groundbreaking ceremony of the Hindu temple that's quite close by. We held 2 community workshops, and of course we had the online survey that was open for that full 8-week period. So look, we received really good feedback. As I said, we had 261 responses to the survey, which was great. We had 12 people who came across those 2 different workshops and gave up some of their Saturday morning and a Thursday evening to work through that with us. So we really appreciated that time. We spoke to 47 people as we door knocked around the local residents. We had 22 people stop and talk to us during the pop-up, and we spoke with you guys through the council meetings. Some of the feedback we received for the 2 different sites at Moncrief, we got a really strong desire for a supermarket and cafes on both of those through those sites. Parking was seen as a real priority, both underground and open air. Parking was welcomed. People showed some concern around local traffic impacts from nearby schools and also the future Hindu temple and needing to take that into account. And green, open space and recreational space was also something that should be prioritised and was highly looked at. Feedback for the site in Taylor was similar. Cafes were really a welcome inclusion. Parking should also be prioritised here, and again, green and open space and recreational space was quite high. We received feedback across the engagement program that was quite diverse, as particularly at all the different interactions that we had, but some of the messages are really quite clear. People are simply anticipating local shops at Taylor and Moncrief. They see them as a real crucial link in the community that bring people together and also provide more options for people to shop and do business locally close to home. People value ease of access, convenience and ample parking that came through. And many see the need to incorporate recreational space, green space and open spaces into the development of these sites. So if you want to find out more about what we found in that one and dive into it a bit deeper, we do have the listening report available now on our Your Say page. This is our wealth of knowledge of everything from that engagement. So what's next for this one? The feedback and input we received during this consultation will now help shape design concepts that will form a vital component of the land sale for these sites. And I might hand back to Andrew, who can talk through a bit more of that process with you, as that's back over to his team.
Thank you, Nicole. Yeah, so I think it's really important for us to be able to articulate the feedback that was received, what the key points were and where they actually have gone into informing an outcome so that the stakeholders can feel like they can see where their feedback's been used. Where the process is up to right now is it's a two-stage tender process. The initial stage was more of a shortlisting for people who had adequate capacity and experience to be developing a commercial development of this scale. So that's really just looking at shortlisting the types of people that will move into a more detailed tender. As we take the feedback, it's going to help to shape a place framework and the principles of what we want. So that's going to look at things like public domain outcomes. It's going to inform the scaling of the tender weighting, so that the tender weighting will be balanced between financial, but also the non-financial, things like how the open space, how things function around. We're expecting the second stage tender will go out in 2022, early 2022. But we would hope to get back to the Community Council prior to that tender going out, if practical, just so we can talk through this one in a little bit more detail. Again, wanting to be able to demonstrate to the community where their feedback has actually influenced the land release process. Onto the Gungahlin Town Centre, Section 3. So I think this is the one that will definitely have attention with lots of relevant things. As Peter alluded to, there has been a response to the petition and 2 motions tabled this morning in the Assembly and spoken to. So what we're looking at here is SLA is committed to placemaking engagement to inform future releases. And when we're looking at that, we think that the precinct or the broader scale is the right scale to do that. That starts to look holistically at the built form, the public domain, how the linear park integrates, how the uses work with each other, what's already in the town centre, what might not be in the town centre. This little map on the right is showing, I guess, the high level scale. It's a very crude map in terms of just showing the rough extent of the scale that we're looking at. Again, that would be a bit of a fluid boundary. There'll be need to start to consider active route connections on footpaths and public domain outside of that, and there'll also be need to consider what the built form outcomes and the offerings in the broader town centre and how this east precinct can help to participate in that. As we noted a little bit earlier, the engagement will need to align with the DV364 outcomes, which are expected to be released around January 2022. We've talked a bit to precinct level place-led, so we're expecting a pretty robust engagement. The next slide is going to talk a little bit towards what the opportunities are there. Expecting the public-facing element of this to kick off around 2022, but we are doing background lead-up work. In terms of talking of the scale here, it was mentioned this morning in the Assembly, there's about 13.5 hectares worth of land. So a pretty significant amount of land, and a lot of these blocks are about a hectare on their own, which can support quite a large amount of uses on their own. So as we get into the engagement, we're also thinking there'll be opportunity for what you might call sub-character areas. You might have a character area that looks at the linear park interface and what's appropriate there. You may have a character area that looks at the Flemington Road interface and what's appropriate on that one. So we are expecting that because of the large scale and the complexities within this precinct, there will be a need to subdivide and have a look at quite a few other smaller iterations through that. Also important to note that the work that we'll be doing is the finer grain place shaping to support the work that's already been done. We're not revisiting DV364, we're building on that. We're building on the district community needs assessment and all the other background information that's there to help shape what the community wants. This next slide talks a little bit through our planned approach. It is going to be a lengthy engagement in a very complex area, so we're expecting this will be an ongoing dialogue. This won't be the last time we're talking to the Community Council or stakeholders, but we expect that we'll be quite active in this space over the next 6 to 12 months, and even after that, beyond that, with reviewing and making sure things that have functioned as they should have. Where we're currently sitting is this blue section. So that's looking at inputs and backgrounds to help support our engagement program. So that's going to include elements such as place insights. So trying to gather data that goes a little bit deeper beyond just the standard demographics you could get from the Bureau of Statistics, looking at how people are currently using the space, what some of the gaps might be, looking at how the available information from inventory, built form, tenancies, community needs assessments that have been done to date, gathering a lot of that, collating that. Again, the built form, existing built form is very important to some of the gaps that might have been missing from other parts and what's left within the east area and how that can support the overall town centre. So not working in isolation, and then also shaping the desired outcomes. Again, reviewing back to the precinct, the total town centre precinct level engagement objectives and how the blocks that are left help to support that. So as we move from that into an engagement process, we've identified that the place shaping of the built form works very closely with the public domain, and that interface is a little bit fluid. So we're very careful that we want to do those together. When we talk public domain, that is going to include the linear park, which is, I jump back to a slide again, that's this green element down the middle. I would stress that that could be a little bit fluid, and as we run through the place making exercise, there may be some opportunity to start to refine this boundary around what works with the adjacent uses, but we won't jump ahead of that. That's just saying that there may be some opportunity based on the outcomes. When we run into the engagement, again, we have identified that we want to try to get to a broad range of stakeholders. We've already done a level of stakeholder mapping, and in particular, we've tried to focus on following similar practices to our Belconnen engagement, where we've identified stakeholders that are hard to reach. Good example of that is our youth market and young market. So for that particular engagement, we went into the schools, we went to the skate parks, we brought pizza to them, noting that food can be a good motivator. We'll be looking to repeat some of those strategies from recent engagements. Again, Gold Creek's another good example of some success we've had with engagement processes. So we'll be looking to replicate and scale, but also recognise that every place is different and the communities are different. So we will need to scale a solution that works for the town centre. So when we're looking at potential engagement, look, there's quite a high likelihood that we'll look to form a stakeholder panel. That gives us a good opportunity to invest time and resources into making a representative panel experts on the space and helping them to understand the complexities of the task in front of them. We've identified opportunities to engage with thought leaders who will look at leading practice, best practice, also examine other example precincts that are working well with similar demographics and areas, good opportunities for workshops and surveys. Again, we've identified that the pop-ups and trying to get our engagement to move to where the people are versus sitting back and expecting them to come to us is going to be really necessary for this process to work. We've also noted that buy-in is very important, so these pop-ups can help us to continue to get community buy-in. Industry is also going to be a very important stakeholder in shaping this engagement, as will other government partners. So jumping away from the engagement, that would lead us down to the outputs, because it's very important that if in doing a robust engagement process that we can then demonstrate how the community's feedback actually goes into some level of certainty on an outcome versus just sort of shaping an opportunity. So what we're likely to be then investigating there would be principles getting woven into delivery deeds, place deeds. That's going to look at things like typology and use. So within a building, a mandated commercial use, a mandated residential or whatnot, to make sure that rather than one dominant use, if we are feeling like a certain site or a certain building needs to have a certain density, we'll be trying to put more mandates and controls around facilitating that actually happening, and then tying that all into the sales pack where there's really strong levers for government to work with developers to ensure that those processes actually happen, or potentially, which would never be our intent, take that land back to ensure it can be re-released for the expectations. Again, moving into timing, so we're expecting around 2022. Again, that's going to work with when government releases the response to the DV364 inquiry, but it's also going to importantly allow us a little bit more time to make sure we've done a good job of this inputs and background information gathering to help support an engagement process. We're noting that it could be a 6 to 12 month engagement process, and we would be hoping to do a lot of that up front, but then we also recognise, as this will start to tag onto a lengthier indicative land release program, there will be an ongoing need to review, adapt, monitor how things are going, continue to adjust as we move forward, and as the indicative land release jumps out. We'd also expect there's opportunity for this level of precinct engagement to help inform what the indicative land release looks like, what the numbers and what the uses and diversity within that look like. So that's pretty well taken me to the end of the presentation. Certainly welcome any questions on any element or other elements that we haven't covered tonight from the team.
Well, thank you, Andrew. It's good to see some activity and commitment to a number of issues that are near and dear to the community's heart. Are there any questions? I'm looking for people in the chat window or to put their hand up in the participants window. And until I see that, I'll ask a couple of questions I took note of. You mentioned block 1 of 249 is designated for community use. Do you have any idea what that use will be or is expected to be? Because I understand that's not for the community centre. That was part of the election commitment.
Sure. So the community centre location hasn't been identified, so it could be there, or it could be anywhere else. There will be further engagement on locking down where that community centre goes. In terms of that particular block, there's some high-level talking and some indicative land releases, previous ones to potential for aged care. And again, that particular use has been reinforced through the district level community and facility needs guide. But we have probably identified there's an additional opportunity to do some extra analysis on some extra analysis and consultancy on how the outcomes of that district needs assessment are applied on a site specific. So I guess the answer to that is there isn't a specific use currently identified, but we will be doing a little bit more work to help inform that, in particular with our EPSDD colleagues.
So who would be the right person or entity to engage in that engagement? Just on the assumption that they don't get around to actually reaching out.
Look, I think given that it's looking within the realms of our engagement, precinct engagement element, I think it's going to be an important part of that. So I'd say SLA will probably be looking to lead the further work that's done on that one, given it is in the current financial year. But again, it could get some adjustment with the outcomes of DV364.
Yep. Okay. I mean, just for the record, I think aged care is an excellent thing to be looking at. Again, looking for hands and comments in the chat window, but seeing none, I move on to my additional questions. Timelines for Kenny. We've had a few residents ask, when can I buy land in Kenny? And I've said, I'm not sure I'd hold my breath. That's quite a long way away.
Sure. So at the high level, it is showing on next financial year on the indicative land release program. As we've indicated before, the indicative land release program is indicative. I think there's a high likelihood it could potentially stretch out a little bit beyond that. There's a lot of work still to inform those processes in terms of estate development plans, potentially concept plans and other things. So at this point, it's probably at least 2 to 3 years away from any opportunity for a land release, but we will keep the community council abreast as that one evolves and we get a higher level of confidence on what the actual release program will look like.
What's this land size we're looking for, Taylor? Sorry, the Jacker. That you're talking about 700 blocks that are going to be released. What would be the block size?
Yeah, great question. So there's a diversity of options within there. There's a lot of 2 to 3 story townhouses that would be typically only be around your 150 to 200 square meters. There's a lot of detached housing. That detached housing is typically around the 450 to 500 square meter blocks. So they're relatively large blocks by today's standards. We've got some multi-units, which would be your more compact offering. So a good mix of block sizes, affordability budgets for different lifestyles.
Okay, so when they did the last time for Jacker, the roads were very small. The buses can't go. So hopefully you would consider those things and make sure the public transportation is available, because currently Jacker, the bus, the roads are too small for the buses to go.
Yep, excellent observation. And our TCCS and all other parts of government are important entities in terms of the consultation of delivering those. We've had a lot of engagement with TCCS, and they do look at things like turning circles for buses, particularly with the larger bus that's now being used in the ACT, that articulated bus. So all of those considerations have gone into informing the, the road reserve sizes and things like that. So definitely we continue to review any issues such as those and look to implement so we don't have recurrences in future suburbs.
Okay. Thanks very much, Andrew. Any other questions?
If no one put their hand, Peter, I just have a question about the shops. So the Moncrief shops, so when are we going to see it's going to get progressed and stuff? So pretty much where are we going to go from here? What's the process from here?
Sure. So that one's currently had an expression of interest close, which was the first stage of a two-stage release process. So we're running through the tenderers on that one. The next stage will be the second stage, which is where we actually release it to a developer. That's where we talked in the second stage of our presentation on following the Your Say engagement and the other engagement we've done. We'll use that feedback to help shape a framework in terms of how that's delivered and help shape the tender evaluation criteria and the scalings. That tender is likely to go out in early 2022. So we would be hoping that we finalise the release process by the end of this financial year. There's then, in terms of the forward development, there's a few elements a little bit outside of SLA's control. So the developer will then have to do a development application and get that through the planning authority. So it could still be a little way off before you see shops coming out of the ground, but we'll be hoping we've finalised the actual release process to a developer end of the coming financial year.
Thanks, Andrew.
Sorry, June 2022 for clarity.
Cool. Thanks.
Terrific. And just to be clear, the KC community sites, that particular piece of engagement is still with EPSDD as a continuation of their assessment of community facilities in Gungahlin. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's a pretty good high-level answer at the moment. So government has committed to more engagement. Exactly who will run that and where it falls, there may be some further negotiation on that, but currently EPSDD would be leading that one.
Good. Thanks very much. All right. Well, obviously, much hangs on what the government responds to the DV364 inquiry. And certainly our read of that was that it was pretty critical of the process that led to 364 and some of its outcomes. So it will be interesting to see how that plays. Andrew, thanks very much for your time and for the engagement with the SLA. I see no other questions, so I will leave you to the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Okay, as indicated on the agenda and as flagged earlier, Kevin Cox, who's a member of the Community Council, has been a very active advocate for a whole range of creative ways to address energy, power, and a whole bunch of issues for some years, and has very generously offered to provide a bit of a session on community batteries. Kevin is also actively involved in the process mentioned by the SLA, and that's Kevin being involved, that's not the GCC being involved, and hence Andrew's comment about being able to keep those processes clearly delineated. With that preamble out of the way, I'll throw to you, Kevin.
Okay, thanks, Peter. So I'll share my screen.
Sorry. Andrew, Kevin, I accidentally muted you and not me. My 1,000 pardons.
That's all right. That's all right.
Power of the mouse.
You can, when I start to ramble on, you can continue. Let's see, I share this one here and I click share. So does that share it? And now we do a presentation. So how does that sound?
Looks like a big PowerPoint slide.
Great. It is a big PowerPoint slide. So as you've just heard, the Suburban Land Agency has, I think, doing a really interesting process. This is a pre-tender consultation, if you like. And one of the things that that they really want to do is to try and work out how we can have community involvement with the proposed Jacker community batteries. Pre-Power Cooperative, of which I'm a director, is preparing a response to this with the idea that one way of getting community involvement is to have community ownership as a really good way of being able to get community involvement. So we're putting up a suggestion, or we'll be putting up a suggestion as to how that might happen. And the idea of that is that so that when the tender document is written, we don't get excluded. As you know, a lot of the tender documents, when they get written, they exclude lots of things. We want to make sure that community ownership is not excluded simply by the way in which the tender document is written. So that's our main objective at the moment. But also we want to be able to put up a tender response that that is pretty good and that will attract a lot of interest, we hope, from the SLA. At the end of this, there's going to be an invitation to anyone to join us and to support this process of going through, working out how to do community ownership of batteries. It's going to be a long, interesting process, and I would expect it'll take at least 6 months for the whole process to get finished. Now, I have a co-presenter, Barton Highway, who you can perhaps see on the screen. I'm going to pass it over to Barton, and Barton will introduce himself, and I will handle the slides, and he will tell me when to move on.
Hi everyone, thanks for the opportunity, Kevin, and Peter. So hi, my name is Barton Highway. I'm the director of Polygon Energy, and I'm basically quickly just going to talk about what Polygon Energy is doing in the community battery space in partnership with EcoSpectral. So I'm the director of Polygon Energy, and EcoSpectral is headed by David Kitely. And we have partnered to develop a solution for community batteries. And we are also preparing a response to SLA for the Jacka community battery. So this is by making use of my experience in power system engineering for last 14 years. And David's experience in system design. So he's an expert in communications as well as system designs. So we're putting the two expertise together to develop a solution. We've got a good solution there, but and hopefully that would be acceptable to the community when it's rolled out. So the solution intends to benefit the Jacka households by improving the self-sustainability. So essentially, with the decreasing feed-in tariffs, the idea is to essentially store or utilize whatever energy your solar system is generating rather than exporting. So, and then if you have a battery, you're essentially self-sustainable. Together, the electricity network company is also one of the beneficiaries, because for them, the power quality improves. The less people export to the network at the same time, there are less issues in terms of voltage rise, flicker, and other power quality issues. So that's the intention. So if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me on the contact details here. Kevin, if you don't mind changing the slide. So this is just this slide could be a little bit outdated, but gives you a rough boundary of Jacka, and the green dots are where the community batteries are planned, and they're essentially next to the pad mount substations. And as Andrew mentioned, they're similar to a pad mount substation, which is approximately 2 meters by 1 meter in dimension. Next slide, Kevin, please. And this graph essentially shows a load profile for any residential or any household. So you have typically a morning peak and an evening peak. Next slide, please, Kevin. And then the red curve is the generation profile for a solar system. This is not a typical curve. This is more sort of for a day like today, where it's a bit cloudy and you have a bit of cloud cover where you can see the dip. But essentially the generation is maximum during the afternoon, whereas the load is not as much for households, because people are at work, in school, etc. And so there's a bit of mismatch between the generation time and the energy usage time. So the idea of using the batteries is to reduce those peaks by, I'll show you in the next slide. Kevin, do you mind? Next slide. Yeah. So that's the generation curve. And that shows that any excess energy from the solar is stored in a battery. So it could be a local battery or a community battery. Community batteries have benefits over local, but I'll speak about that in one of the slides. So, and then the idea is to maximize the use of batteries, but at the same time, we want to make sure that the batteries are not oversized, because they are pretty expensive and they last for 10 years at the moment with the technologies that we have. So if we could minimize the size of batteries, that minimizes the cost and maintenance as well. Next slide, please, Kevin. So the part of the solution is demand response as well. So and what is demand response? It's essentially a supply and demand thing. So the ability to control the load, the appliances inside the house to match the generation time is called demand response. And the typical loads that consume a lot of electricity inside a house is the HVAC, which is your heating and cooling. That's about 30%. The hot water is about another 30%, a little bit less than that. And pool heating, if there is a pool. So, and the other loads like lighting, etc., are generally a lot less. So then enabling this automatic control of these loads to match with the generation profile is very important, because that minimizes the size of your batteries. Next slide, Kevin. So, and that is enabled by a system called eBRIM. So eBRIM is developed by David Kitely of EcoSpectral, and I've helped him by giving him a bit of insight into power systems. And and essentially it is an automatic load control solution, and it's behind the meter. So it's within the premises of a house, and it communicates with your solar system to control the loads in real time. So essentially it is an orchestration of loads and generation to maximize the solar self-consumption. And as I said earlier, it also minimizes the size of the battery. Next slide, please, Kevin. So I've just listed a few benefits of a community battery. As opposed to eBRIM, this is a front of a meter solution. So as shown in the other slide, the battery is in the public land next to pad mount substations, and it's a shared resource. So that's why it becomes a bit cost effective. It's owned and maintained by third parties. So again, it's better than a local battery, and it's great because it maximizes the solar utilization. So by storing that excess energy from the solar rather than exporting it at very low feed-in tariffs. And it promotes the self-sustainability at suburb level rather than at a household level. And it also benefits the network by improving its power quality. So those are just some benefits, and back over to you, Kevin.
Okay, thanks, Barton. I wish to talk a little bit about community ownership. The normal way in which communities own things or in cooperatives is through shareholder ownership. So people actually have shares in a lot of the cooperatives. Some of them don't, but many of them do have shares. However, if we arrange our cooperatives so that the cooperative itself owns the asset, then we can enable everyone to participate. So one of the difficulties that you have with ownership is that it's hard to actually get access to capital if you don't have any already. And so individuals within society often can't get hold of capital because they just don't have any, which is a bit sad. But if we combine together the assets together and arrange it appropriately, then everyone can participate in an equal way. The money actually comes in from interest-free loans to the cooperative, perhaps from the government at the moment, with the interest-free loans scheme for sustainable housing that's going on at the moment. So that's a possibility to be able to get some money in from there. Also, by some members prepaying for cooperative services, capital can come in that way. So people who have some who are not getting very good interest rates on their bank accounts might like to prepay for cooperative services. The investment returns with this approach are much like a CPI index superannuation allocated pension. So you're not looking for capital gains. What you're looking for is a stream of income. And this approach enables you to have what's like a CPI index superannuation pension, but it goes on for twice the duration. And it can be returned, your returns can be in the form of money or as discounts on services. On the other side, on the ownership side, on the consumer side, the members, if they are purchasing the eBRIM system, they will pay 70% of the eBRIM savings. In other words, there are savings going to be made, and rather than paying 100% of the savings in order to be able to buy the eBRIM system, they pay 70% of the eBRIM savings, and they gradually acquire equity in the cooperative. There will be a profit associated with these cooperatives, and the profit distribution is decided democratically by all members. The process can be kick-started with interest-free loans to prepayment cooperatives for sustainable household eBRIM systems. Now, we've decided that the eBRIM system is the right one to go with because there actually isn't anything like it anywhere else in the world. That's why we need to go with it at the moment. It is quite an interesting system, and people are moving towards it, but the system which is developed here in Canberra is in my opinion, world beating. But it is separate from the cooperative itself, of course. It's not, we have little to do with the actual cooperative, with the actual eBRIM system. We just use it. What we can do with it is that we can, before the JACA tender goes out, what we hope to do is to sign up some members of the Gungahlin community to install and purchase the eBRIM system so that we can do a better calibration of what is actually needed. Different groups of people do behave in different ways, and your usage of electricity will vary. So we're looking for interested people who would like to become a member of the Pre-Power Cooperative and come along on the journey with us. There will be a $10 joining fee. Anyone can join, owners or renters. If you live in an apartment, a townhouse, self-standing, with or without solar panels, doesn't really matter. We're aiming for 20 households to join up first. and to get eBRIM installed over the next few months, 3 or 4 months. We hope to get a few households with the eBRIM system in so that we can start to calibrate and be able to help put in a better tender approach, a tender response when the thing comes out. If you're interested, just send me an email to kevin@wlpc.com.au along with your phone number, and I'll contact you and let you know how you can go about joining the system. That's it, Peter. Have we got any questions?
I do, Kevin.
Yep. So Henley.
Yeah, like I'm just a bit confused about the intent of this presentation. Is it talking about explaining the community about what is the community batteries, or is it promoting eBRIM, or is it promoting a particular brand? Totally got lost. So are we trying to explain the community how the community battery is going to look like, how that's going to help, or it's about a business model that you are proposing?
It's about both, Henley. So we've thought we'd better explain what the community battery means and why it's important and how it sort of works. And then I was then briefly explaining that what the cooperative is doing is going to first of all put in a pre-tender response, which is the one for saying this is what we think we might be able to do as far as the community is concerned, and this is why. And then what will happen will be the cooperative will put in a bid to be able to own the batteries. The eBRIM and eco-spectral people will put in a bid for separate bid for designing and having a complete system going on. So the cooperative is about making the opportunity of being able to be part of ownership of the batteries. That's what the cooperative is about. It's so that anyone in Jacka or anyone in Gungahlin can become a member of the cooperative.
So potentially there could be a different business stakeholders who might be interested in doing the same thing.
Oh, there will be. There will be a lot of interest in this. This is going to be a big deal because community batteries are going to be important all over Australia. So there will be a large number of people very involved in this. Most of the bids will come in from people perhaps like Macquarie Bank who want to own the batteries. Well, we're not sure where that will come from, but what we want to do is to put in a bid where the community owns the batteries rather than some third party.
So just on this theme that Henley's raised, I think all of us understand how you might have panels on your roof and you might have your own battery at home, and I think all of us think, oh, community battery. Well, that's multiple homes share one battery. Are we talking about 5 homes or 50 homes or 500 homes? And what are the kind of 2 or 3 key reasons why this work? Why this technically is a better solution? Then there's obviously a whole bunch of issues around the commercial model, but just technically, what is a community battery? I mean, that indicative picture that was put up showed, I think, 6 community batteries or locations, or they 6 locations, and we're only talking about 1 battery. And
okay, I'll ask Bubba in a moment, but first of all, those green dots came from a study that ANU ran on exactly this problem. Is it better to have individual batteries or is it better to have community batteries? they concluded that it was more efficient to have community batteries than individual batteries. It would, you got a better performance out of the total system. And Bavin might be able to explain why that's the case.
Yeah, always forget to unmute myself. So, yeah, look, I think you're right, Kevin. There's a bit of efficiency issue there, and because it's a front of the meter solution, it's a common battery for the suburb or that area that's designed. So in terms, it's a cost-effective solution rather than having individual batteries for each installation. So that's cost is one of the biggest issues, because it's a shared resource, it sort of normalizes the whole thing. So some people may have solar, some may not have solar. I mean, in Jacka, it's planned that all the houses will have solar. But if it's a community battery, the people without solar systems can also take benefits of a community battery. So that's the other benefit. So it's looking at a suburb level rather than individual houses. And the other biggest benefit is for the network companies, because for the electricity networks, the peak demand, especially the evenings, is a big issue, because everyone comes home, turns on their ovens and heating, cooling, etc., and that increases the loads significantly. So the network has to cater for that peak demand, even if it's only for 2 or 3 hours, but it has to be built to cater for that demand. And the rest of the day, that capacity is not utilized. So it is an investment that is not completely utilized and only designed for those 2-3 hours. So for networks, it's best to sort of have a lower peak and spread that load evenly throughout the network. So that's another benefit for the network companies, and it improves the power quality essentially.
Okay, right. Well, good tips. Mark Scarborough has a question.
Yeah, look, this to me makes a lot of sense. There's been a lot of talk over the last year about electricity providers actually charging micro solar plants to feed into the grid rather than paying them to feed into the grid, because of the talking about the overload into the grid during those peak generation times. And I kind of wondered this when they started talking about this. Why aren't those electricity providers actually putting in batteries, much like you would like a water dam or water reservoir, to capture that water to then utilize when things are drier? To me, this makes a lot of sense. And I think that obviously having a big community battery makes sense. You've got the efficiencies of bulk purchase, and you'll be able to get a much bigger battery for your bang, obviously. So for me, I'm not in Jacka, I'm nearby. I've got a decent sized solar system on my roof, obviously generating excess power during the day that I'm currently feeding into the grid and getting minimal return on. How can I take advantage of this? Can I utilize this proposed battery in Jacka, and then pump power into it during the day and then draw back off it or off the grid, and not be charged for that power that I've actually generated, and not be billed for also putting it into the grid?
Yeah, in the initial ones, that won't be the case. But what you can do, Mark, is that you can get your eBrim system and use your hot water as a battery. Effectively, use your heating load things as a battery. So you can get a lot of the demand shifting all on your own, just simply with the eBrim system now, which is what we want to do. We want to get some of these eBrim systems up and running in the areas and do that. If what we're talking about with Jacka works, then in effect, what will happen will be that each of the different areas will become little self-contained mini grids. So with relatively little power actually having to come in from the outside. And when it does come in from the outside, it'll come in at relatively low prices. So you can, if all this works the way which we envisage it, or hope it'll work, the electricity grid will divide up into lots of smaller local mini grids that will be connected, that will be able to move power between them, but most of the power will be generated within the mini grids and then distributed themselves. Now, if the community owns that mini grid, it won't initially, but if it owns a mini grid, then there are very significant savings to be made in the long term. But the starting point is just getting a few in to see how it all goes.
So is there, I suppose that the idea being is that Jacka would be a proof of concept for this and establish, you know, what the costs would be. Is there then an opportunity that for people in my suburb that I could rally the troops within my suburb and then go to the government and say, look, can we find a bit of land that we're going to buy our own battery? Yeah, okay.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's exactly what we want. It's exactly what we want to happen. We do have to be, I believe, as a community, we have to be wary of these third parties coming in and essentially taking away a lot of profits that the community itself can have. That's what typically happens in a lot of these things, but you better not get me onto that.
So just quickly to add on to that, Mark, I think that's exactly, you've hit the nail on the head by saying that if you have a group of people interested in a particular area, and if there is a support from the government or SLA, that is definitely possible. And that's what small areas like universities and even apartments, those kind of, there are microgrids which are self-sustained. They have their own solar generation or any kind of renewable generation. They have their local storage in terms of a battery, not a local one, but a common that can be shared by a number of residents. And another backup generation in terms of like diesel generators or something, just in case if there are days like today where you wouldn't have a lot of generation. So a microgrid has to be designed to be able to sustain all different types of loads and can supply that particular area. So yeah, that's a fantastic solution, but it has to be in that local geographical area. If you're not in Jacka right now, you cannot take advantage of that community battery.
Have you got any indicative costs of what it would be to set up the community battery?
So yeah, we're working on that at the moment. Can't give you a figure at the moment, sorry.
The estimate at the moment from the ANU study suggested that the 8 batteries was going to be about $1 million for the 8 batteries. That was their preliminary size. And what's the eBrim system cost, Barton?
It's about $1,500 approximately per household.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think this is a very interesting space. Certainly, even just the idea of having an all-electric suburb, I think, is actually pretty interesting. And it's good to see a few different things being tried. And when I said earlier to the SLA when we spoke to them last week, at least they're creating the contract opportunities for the community to be engaged very early, or creative ideas to be in early. A lot of these commercial approaches to the market often end up being based on assumptions about the way the world always is. So, I'm glad that some creativity is being opened up in terms of what the process is. Do keep us informed. If there are any sort of general information links that are good to share around community batteries, and please pass those through and we can put them up and keep the community engaged.
So, so again, if people want some more information, please just send me an email and I'll contact you, and probably we'll arrange a separate meeting later on, probably in a week or two's time, for those who are interested.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Barton. All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of tonight's meeting. We did have a couple of options lined up for more information. In particular, we're trying to get some more information about exactly what's happening with the Joint Emergency Services building in Gungahlin. There's some money in the budget for some of the current occupants to move, and exactly when that's going to happen, and what's going to happen with expansion in terms of the police who are actually in the building, refurbishment of the existing building, and all that is still very, very unclear. So we're trying to get someone to come along and talk about that. I also mentioned we'll have the Vinta Group talking about stage 4 of the marketplace development. And I know the most important thing you're all hanging on is that next month is our AGM and the opportunity to get formally involved with the Community Council. But I would like to stress, if there's an area of the sort of things you see us doing, you don't have to become an elected member of the council. Just let us know you're interested in doing something, or if you're prepared to contribute an opinion and a viewpoint. That's really, really useful, and we'd be lovely to have you on board. So with that, and if there are no further questions or comments from the chat or the hand raising, I will close tonight's meeting, and thank you all for joining, and we'll see you in December.
Thank you.